101 Part-Time Jobs is the name of the game. If you're listening to this, you probably know how difficult it is to get a job to cover the bills. Indeed Flex is a simple app that covers that with temporary and flexible work available when you need it. I spent my whole 20s going job to job, feeling guilty when I left a role to go traveling or playing music. I did retail, delivery driving, bar work. And it took me years to realize that feeling of guilt wasn't necessary. Looking back, it was because my only options were working at places that made you feel like you should work there forever. Indeed Flex is designed for people looking for temporary and flexible work that fits around their schedule. You just download the app, have a quick interview, and you're ready to go. There are thousands of shifts on the app, so you can pick and choose the ones you want. No messing around, no lengthy CVs and cover letters. Just start earning. With the holidays fast approaching, if you're looking for more funds, head to Indeed Flex to find your next temporary role.
Hey friends, this is Audie Cornish, host of CNN This Morning and The Assignment, and guess what? Every story you care about, every angle you want unpacked is now streaming on CNN. That means you can catch my show or other CNN programming whenever you want on your favorite device. And a subscription also gets you access to exclusive video series and unlimited articles. So subscribe to CNN at cnn.com/subscription.
Like it says on the tin, 101 part-time jobs. You do have 101 part-time jobs.
Well, maybe I have 101 full-time jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I bet they feel full-time.
Well, yeah, I think that's the most crucial aspect of it is being fully present. You know, be here now. That sensibility of understanding that whatever it is that you're focused on is worth the focus, and that's all it is. Of course, the mind moves. The mind moves, and that part, I always think of it more along the lines of like waste management, you know, in terms of like making sense of this thought that's going on in the back of the head, and maybe I'm going to jot that down because that might have its place too, and maybe I'm going to have a quiet moment when I can pay some attention to that.
Yeah. Do you think about the offcuts of what you do? You know, where like you're spending so much time writing a script or a poem or a song, and you know that like the end product will only be there, you know, it wouldn't have existed without all those offcuts, which is probably going to be a lot of material,
you know. Yeah, except I once again, it may be that I write in the offcuts, you know, so that I might be just vibing and enjoying conversations and music and reading, doing a lot of reading and what have you. And there's little offcuts, and I take those opportunities to like, you know, taking full advantage of the offcuts. And before you know it, you might have, you know, a few more pages of a script, a few more stanzas of a poem, a few more, you know. So it's an interesting balance. And then sometimes it's the other way around, you know, where you're really sitting down and focusing on writing and like the music catches your ear and you're like, you know, and you got to go into the music, you know, you got to pick up an instrument or something.
I think about the time that it takes, the time to make yourself available for that. You've been making cool stuff for a long time now. So maybe, you know, this is almost like a different world, but do you remember that sort of transitionary time when like, you know, you were maybe working other like regular jobs, quote unquote, and then finding time afterwards or before work to kind of do what you were trying to do, and that transition of like prioritizing, because, you know, you have to pay rent, right? You've got
all of that for sure, you know. So I mean, I decided I wanted to act, and my first love is theater. I decided that when I was 8 or 9 years old in the 3rd grade, and I went to school to study acting, and my dad had been like, I'll support you as an actor if you get a law degree or something. And for a minute, I thought that I was going to go to law school, you know, just following the will of my parents. And then I realized I was choosing between acting conservatory and law school. And I realized, like, why would I put any energy on something to fall back on? If you do that, you might actually fuck around and fall back. And so I decided to put all my energy towards what I wanted to do. And so the thing is, right, I did a lot of theater, and that, as a student, theater was my full-time job.
You got no choice there. It's like, okay, you go.
You have to commit. Like you can't be late for rehearsal. You know, you all of this stuff. And so then it was it's a roundabout answer to your question, because I've never not been focused on the arts in my life. I've never prioritized something over the arts. I've needed money at times and have accepted little jobs to make money. Like, you know, I was a barista, and I worked alongside other poets and film directors at a cafe in Brooklyn, where luckily the guy who owned the place, he liked poets and artists. And so we were all there, serving coffee and cakes and what have you. But our full-time focus was writing poetry. And this is the other thing, is that, you know, I was focused on theater, and then I didn't realize how long I had been focused on poetry through focusing on the writing of plays and other people's writing, you know? And so when I finally decided to focus on writing poetry, that was the offshoot. And then I kind of experienced a miracle, because the year that I started reading poetry, which was in 1995, the first time I ever shared a poem publicly was March 16th, 1995, at a place called the Brooklyn Moon Cafe. Yeah. And I had a number of people come up to me afterwards and offer me oh, we want you to read with Allen Ginsberg. We want you to read with the Last Poets. That summer, unexpectedly, and really unexpectedly, I ended up paying my rent through poetry readings. Yeah.
What did that feel like? Do you remember that feeling?
I remember the feeling of reading the poem for the first time. I remember in front of people. And if I were to liken that to something in a pop sense, because my background had been theater, in the sense of never really breaking the fourth wall, never really looking at the audience, always dealing with the writings of others. And here I was sharing something that I had written, and I was looking at people as I was sharing it. There was something that was miraculously telling me dude, you think you have it all figured out, but there's a lot more of yourself that I can show you. If you're open to it. Because I had already experienced beautiful, transformative experiences on stage as an actor, embodying a character, losing myself in that, where you could have the worry of a phone bill or rent or whatever before, you get on stage and then find yourself in the middle of this story that you're telling, and it's beautiful, and you've found this, and you've lost all the things that were clouding your mind beforehand. But with poetry, suddenly I was being awakened to the fact that there was stuff that I personally had to share of my own experience in writing and what have you, and I didn't expect it to ever take the front seat. Like I said, my first love is theater and all of that, and I had given up making music when I was 17 because I thought I was too old. Okay.
Wow. What were you playing?
I was rapping.
Okay.
I was rapping. Yeah. I was rapping, and I quit when I was 17.
Isn't that funny?
And then through poetry, opportunities to make music, opportunities to write poetry, and opportunities to act. Like my first opportunity to act in a film, my first film, Slam, didn't come from an audition or through the acting conservatory that I was in. It came through someone seeing me on stage reciting a poem and them asking me to write and acting this film. So poetry, I felt it from the jump, was opening up this thing in me that had been untapped.
Yeah.
And so Yes. I had a graduate assistantship while I was in conservatory for acting, and so I had to, work on the technical crew of the stage, but I was still working on stage.
Your brain was in the doing it.
Yeah. So I mean, I've always had to figure out things to make money, and then at that point, I was like, okay, well, I learned what a chapbook was. Okay. I was like, I'm going to make a chapbook. I was going to a chapbook.
What's a chapbook?
A chapbook is when a poet or writer basically self-publishes a chapter of what would be a book of their work.
Yeah.
And sells it. I used to sell it. I used to create my own merch at my show, poetry readings, open mics.
You're making your own pilot.
Yeah. I was like, here's a little 5-page thing if you want to buy it, and that helped me buy dinner or what have you. Yeah. The other side of it was that by the time I was 24, I had become a father. And so then there was really no fucking around.
Yeah.
I had to, I had a family to support.
Yeah.
And so that also put me in a mind state too of just finding a balance, but it never threw me off balance. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, well, now you're going to have to get a job." And I was like, no, I'm just going to stay focused on my craft, and we're going to trust that that's going to help us provide, and it has. It's all ups and downs, and it's been very wavy and what have you, but it's always been the focus. So it's not to throw the idea off course, the idea of these, like part-time jobs and what have you. But I've always seen it to be crucial to kind of have a full-time focus in terms of an awareness of, and when I talk about poetry, I may not even be talking about writing. I may be talking about the attention that you give to a conversation, the amount of time that you spend listening to other people speak, the amount of time that you spend reading, the amount of time that you spend contemplating, things.
It's funny about like how much we have in our subconscious. I was just thinking before you got here, like I understand, obviously people have anxiety about, do they do the handshake? Do they do the hug? Do they, what are the social norms? And these are all things that we all do subconsciously. And I think poems are one of those things, because it's funny when I read a poem, I'm sure it's the same for everyone. Sometimes I find myself reading it quite quickly, but at the end of it, I see a picture, that I've kind of formed, not by skim reading it exactly, but you kind of let the colors and the feelings and the taste kind of develop in your own mind. A lot of that's like stuff that you take from your own life subconsciously.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Of course. And of course it all depends. Sometimes it's like you say, sometimes it's like that skim reading sort of thing. Sometimes the poem demands, it's really what the poem demands, right? Sometimes the poem demands your full attention. Like, okay, I'm going to get in and see what the hell this person is talking about, And,
it's a very solitary thing, writing as well.
It is. However, I've started writing poems on the subway and in nightclubs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I started writing literally on the dance floor. I was always really focused on like dance and electronic music and all of this stuff. And I kept a little journal in my back pocket. And what I found was that through the music and movement, epiphanies would come. And so I saw my first job as sort of like, I got to be ready to catch these epiphanies when they arrive. You can't control, I remember being at a concert and seeing, I know that they were opening for Femi Kuti, but it was an Egyptian band. We were in Central Park, Summer Stage in New York City, free concert, outdoors, and an Egyptian band was opening for Femi Kuti. And I remember they got stuck in customs and they were announcing from the stage, like, they're coming, they're on their way from the airport, just a little more patience, please. And then they arrive and they're wearing these white robes and the robes are covered in dust. And I remember as a New Yorker thinking like, wait, that's like Egyptian dust on these white robes that these guys just arrived from the airport with? Like, that's the dust on their robes? And the music starts and I get swept away. And the first thought that comes to mind is, yo, they threw basement parties in pyramids. And I have a poem. We threw basement parties in pyramids. I left my tag on the wall. The beats would echo off the stone. And I'm writing it there, listening to them play. It's a lot of words, and ideas come from, being in the moment. And so then the dance is, how do you capture this thing without pulling from the moment? Great conversations, for example. So I used to be maybe more superstitious about it because I had the idea that maybe I could lose ideas. Now I have less of a fear of losing ideas. I understand that those ideas aren't going anyplace and I don't have to necessarily keep a pen and paper on hand to remember them. Like, I trust it more.
Yeah,
but
trust.
in the beginning, I was like, I got to capture this now.
Yes. Yeah. I think in that superstition that you're talking about, you really don't have any control over it. You might think you do occasionally.
Yeah.
But you just don't, right?
Yeah. And that's the other
that film
thing.
Sliding Doors really fucked me up when I was a kid. Have you seen that film?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Because I really started to think like, if I do one thing, then it'll have this kind of butterfly effect. And I've had to kind of realize, like, learn, like, and it is a joke, but it is serious. It kind of fucked up my 20s, this stuff.
Well, that's the thing, especially with artists and success, because it's such a fleeting sort of thing, is that a lot of them can get very superstitious. Like when the day that you give your best performance and then you got a record deal, if that day you open that day by know, putting your shoes on the wrong feet, maybe you're going to be like, I'm going to put my shoes on the wrong feet every day for the, you know, because that's how it happens, you know, and you start creating these like crazy, you know, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you're correct in your analysis. Like, oh no, I meditated that day and I was feeling, you know, really aligned and it helped with the process. And other times it's something totally random that you think you're connecting dots and you're connecting fears.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So how do you delineate between, you know, the fears and the intuitive, you know?
Yeah. What's in your story? What are those things? I mean, I kind of glean, maybe you've had those kinds of thoughts over the years, like what's a fear and what's a kind of feeling myself in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the realization of that which I just said, you know, and that came through relationship and conversation and realizing that like, oh, you know, that entertaining, it's crazy when you're learning to trust your intuition, right? But you also have a feeling where it's like, oh shit, something fucks up is going to happen. And you're like, is it a feeling? Is it a fear?
Yeah.
Is that my intuition?
Yeah.
Or is that my fear?
Is that my witchy side?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, which is the correct side.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, when those things popped up, it's not that I found myself delineating that. It was the capturing of the idea. It was writing down that equation that helped me through it, was realizing that there is, you know, a distinction to be made between the two, and listening closely enough to be able to distinguish was going to be the crucial thing. I find, you know, people say stuff like, oh, if you could leave a message for your younger self, what could you do? And me, I see it the other way. I felt like I had a series of epiphanies that came as a result of not having all of the responsibilities that I knew would come later in life, and that I was like, at that time, sending messages to my elder self, like, if you recite this poem, then it will remind you. And so to me, that's been the practice of capturing those like those frisbees that I threw to myself, you know, years previously, from those epiphanies, and that were about these psychological, emotional, spiritual practice and praxis. So once again, I don't know if I'm answering any question.
Well, no, it makes sense. It is. This is life stuff, and you know, just on this point, you know, I think a lot of people, everyone listening to the show, everyone on Earth is like been in positions, in situations for maybe years at a time where it's like, oh man, I really regret that. You know, that was a bad time.
No regrets.
But, you know, you got to learn. You know, you learn from those really difficult times. No regrets. Right? You learn, like the older you will learn from that. Yeah.
Well, I think there's plenty of things to regret, I'm sure. But if I were to waste my time to regret it, that's
already wasting time.
Yeah, that's a waste of time. Like, you know, it's the realization that, you know, we're students as we go. We learn as we go.
Have you learned about what to write about? Because we follow you on Instagram, and there's a lot of stuff about the genocide, and like that is, I feel like I learn more now from artists than I do from politicians, and maybe that's been that way for people, you know, for forever, for millennia. But does it feel like now, especially in the time that we are in, with the genocide happening, with what's happening in the States? I mean, you know, you have to kind of, if you want to kind of hear anecdotal or empowering or however you want to call it story, you know, you have to go to different people, and those are artists are having
sometimes
a platform, you know, and a message.
Sometimes, I mean, I think there's kind of a time and place for everything, right? You know, before you know, 2023, I did not use my platform in the same way that I began to, but the reason why I began to, aside from, you know, the horrors of what's happening, is because of what I had already personally experienced by spending time with genocide survivors. When
you've been to Gaza, right?
I haven't been to Gaza. I've been to the West Bank, but before, I had a film that I co-directed with my wife, Anisia Uzim, and we had a film called Neptune Frost that came out in 2022, which was not about genocide in any way, shape, or form. It was about mining in the Congo and in Central and Eastern Africa. It was about miners and hackers and the drum as the earliest form of wireless communication. It was about all this. But our cast and crew, who were primarily Burundian, Rwandan, were all connected to the histories of that land, which has which has genocide in its recent history and all of that. They're all survivors or the children of and what have you. And there's just a sensibility that is developed when it's not something that you read about, and it's more so something that you feel that you're connected to. I've spoken to people who lived through those horrors and who had the question of, does the world know? Does the world care? Yeah. So there's that. There's also, as a poet or as an artist in general, I'm usually I was way more mysterious. I never wanted to share my process with people in that way. And my process was always reading the news and constant reading and like reading and listening has always been a huge part of the process. And so with Platform Now, it was like, okay, I'm just going to make my process transparent, because clearly, there's a lot to delineate or to be able, like reading between the lines when the news is so heavily, weighed down with propaganda, when obviously there's a narrative that the government and the state and the media is trying to push, which is different from the actual narrative that Palestinians themselves are telling us directly. And why not share their voices, and why not, share my own personal critique, and why not let go of this idea of mystique for a minute and just
So your process that you're sharing is what you're reading. It's not like your workflow of.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing is that sometimes I may have the words, but it's not about me, and it's not about my words. Sometimes I may be the one to find the words. Sometimes another journalist or another poet or another artist may be the one to find the words, and it may be my job to share their words. Because they were the ones who helped find the words that we need to read today, that are going to help us understand what's going on. You know what I'm saying? And so then it's a matter of me getting out of the way, or like it's not, it's
sharing.
It's just sharing. It's just sharing.
It's how kind of so many kind of big events have been mobilized is the media, right? And so it was maybe the radio a couple of years ago, and now it's social media. That is the media, right? And that's a very empowering thought, because I think a lot of people, and I felt this way for a while, and I kind of stopped at some point and realized I could share opinions without being like, I don't know everything about it. You just have to you share what you understand. And I think that's the powerful thing.
Well, that I have experience in as a writer and poet. I don't necessarily share answers, but I can share questions. I can say this is how I see it, or this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm paying attention to. There's ways of saying things without necessarily having to deliver an expert analysis. You can also learn to recognize an expert analysis when you see one and go, that's an expert analysis. And that's important that you read that. I think it fed me when I know how I felt when I read that. Maybe it will make you feel something when you read that, And
it's important to know you don't know everything, right? No one knows.
It's crucial. Crucial.
Yeah. Listening to that new record you did with Carlos Niño at the Treepeople. And this is a good vibe to talk about it. I'd never heard about Manhattan. Is it Manhattan, right?
Manhattan,
Manhattan, and then the Dutch East India Company. Now we hear a lot about the East India Company because there was a lot of trade down the Thames here.
Of course.
I didn't know that.
It's the first multinational corporation The Dutch East India Trade Company, the Dutch West India Trade Company. It's the first multinational corporation. And I think it's interesting to talk about that primarily because of the fact that, we now live in a world, the Western world is primarily run by multinational corporations that are heavily invested in eradicating populations and using, basically erasing indigenous lives and cultures for the sake of profit.
Yeah.
And not to mention the role that they have oftentimes in our governments. I'm from the United States, and so it's very true of the US government, but I know the NHS just did a deal with Palantir.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
There's lobby groups everywhere.
Yeah.
There are think tanks doing bad things.
Exactly.
Every day.
Exactly. And so to think of, the role that multinational corporations play now, and think of the role that they played then with the Dutch West India and Dutch East India Trade Company, which was in the story I tell in the album is about the wall that they built on the island of Manhattan, which no longer exists, but is the home of, the next level of capitalism that, they say is born in England and then was developed in the United States. And the wall that they built on the island of Manhattan no longer exists, but the line of markation where it existed is still there, and that's Wall Street.
I had no idea.
Yeah. That's why it's called Wall Street. Yeah. And the exchange that they built within those walls still exists as the New York Exchange and New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
And so that relationship between what we term as Black Death and indigenous erasure, which is to say that all capitalism has, at its basis racism, that it's always been like what the British practiced against the Indian, against the Chinese, against the Irish, was always this state-sanctioned, as the abolitionist scholar Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore says, state-sanctioned group individuated vulnerability to premature death, which is to say that you are, willing to jeopardize the lives of not only workers but of groups of people that you deem less meaningful.
They're saying if you're not white, then they don't have to live as long as white people.
Exactly. And of course for the British Empire, the Irish were probationary white. They were not always considered white.
At some point disposable.
Yeah. And so, disposable peoples is how they see it. And that's what we see, when Trump is stationing ships outside of Venezuela and threatening them because of the natural resources there, and they create narratives about drugs and dictatorships, and all it is about the extraction of natural resources at the expense of the people. Right? It's the same thing everywhere, in the Congo, in Sudan, in Palestine. That is the history of Western civilization.
Ireland. I mean, you have extreme poverty in a place where capitalists and the richer countries are coming in and taking your product, crops, oil, whatever it is.
It's the construct. It's the construct of poverty. It's the construct of poverty because these are. The irony is that there's probably no richer land on this planet than Congo.
What do they have?
Everything. Diamonds, gold, coltan, cobalt, rubber. I mean, you think of what King Leopold did to Congo in the early 1800s the late 1800s, beginning of the 19th century, which was simultaneous with the invention of the car. So the Firestone, the rubber for the tires for our cars. It's actually kind of like a joke at some point, isn't it? It's almost like it would be a joke if it didn't come at the expense of millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of Black lives, millions and millions of indigenous lives for rubber. For like you're drinking a coffee. Where did coffee come from? You know what I'm saying? Sugar. Where does sugar come from? All of these things. All of these things that you think are like, I don't know, British or Western culture, like, oh yes, we have to have a cup of tea. Like, where the fuck does the tea come from? How many people did you kill to make tea a part of your culture, to make spice a part of your culture, to make, all of this shit, all of this shit, all of it has come at expense. The sugar in your coffee, the chocolate that you cannot live without, all of it has come at an expense. And so being mindful of that expense and making sense of it, making sense of the fact that, it doesn't have to go down that way. You could have been able to enjoy sugar or coffee without killing people for the sake of it.
There's on the last track, it's sort of almost a sort of a goodbye, isn't it? On this Treepeople record, where and at a moment it sounds like you're about to cry.
Yeah.
And then you kind of come back from it, and it's so moving. And there's a mixture of feelings, and yet the two opposite feelings. There's kind of absolute kind of you feel broken, but there's also like hope there. From I imagine your point of view, but definitely from the listener point of view, because it's like, where do we go? So I wonder, how do you reconcile those two feelings that are pretty at the opposite end of the spectrum to each other?
I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching, and one translation that I read says, the master has faith in the way things are, and that hope is as hollow as fear, And I kind of I like the idea of reckoning with hope being as hollow as fear. I don't put too much faith in hope, and I don't put too much weight on my fears. I acknowledge that, I have an album called The Inevitable Rise and Liberation of Niggy Tardust. My focus, a lot of people focus on Niggy Tardust, but I focus on the inevitable rise and liberation. Because that's the thing, is that the truth will prevail. The powers of being will prevail over the powers that be. It is a life of struggle. They will always try to take advantage of workers, of poor people. They will always try to take advantage, and it will always be our responsibility to wake people up to the fact that we are all connected, and that there's more power and numbers in us than there is in wealth and weapons with them. And so it's not even, like I say, it's not even a matter of hope. It's a matter of that constant realization. But if I were to dance with hope, anytime I hear a good song, anytime I read a good book, anytime I have a great conversation, anytime I meet somebody new that I like, anytime I see a cut on a pair of pants or a sweater in a store, I'm like, that's really cool. Who thought of that? All those things give me hope. All those things, a beautiful moment, food. We shouldn't forget food. All of these things can, because all these things remind you that there are people behind these things, that there are people using their connecting with their passions and realizing that there are other people who will be as passionate about the thing that excites them as they are. Yeah. And so they decide to share it. Yeah. I feel like that's our responsibility. Well, yeah, it's our responsibility to be mindful of that, to remember that, and to act on that, and to also act according to our passions, what we're passionate about, as opposed to how they would have us act out in accordance with the idea of survival and individualism, all those things that capitalism tries to say, hey, you need to get serious. Stop focusing on that bullshit and get serious. What are you doing there making collages? You need to get serious. Get less serious about that. Focus on the things that make you passionate, and I promise that we will have less murder, and we will eventually be able, to transform the society in the way that humanity deserves, that all of humanity deserves. I think about the generation beyond us. A lot of people my age are really thinking about, do I have kids? Because they will undoubtedly live in a worse world than we have right now, and it's pretty rough now. So. I just wonder, do you have any thoughts on that? You've been talking about things that we do right now. You and I won't be on this earth in 50 years, 70 years, whatever it is. You know what I mean? We're only here for a finite time. What happens after that? What happens after them? So that's what our responsibility is. And I have kids, and it's important to do our best within our lifetimes, to transform the society within our lifetimes. And those kids are they're not defeatist or defeated. They're like, you guys are stupid, your laws are crazy, and we're not going to follow them. And why are you doing it this way? And why are you asking me to do it this way? I'm not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? And we sometimes have to shut up and go. It's like when my dad said, I'll support you as an actor if you get a lawyer. Thank goodness I didn't fucking listen to him. I don't need to be a lawyer. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's not what I was passionate about. Even if I like a good argument every now and then, if I can make my case. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But either way, it's kind of up to the kids to kind of disobey the elders. Yeah. It's important. It's important, And that's so I have that poem, Coded Language. Let your children name themselves and claim themselves as the new day. Once again, a message forward. Don't ever forget that. Yeah. Don't ever forget that they know better than you.
And that will speak to trans kids. I mean, you get trans people of all ages.
Exactly. Hello.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah. Know yourself. You know yourself better than anyone else does.
Yeah. And don't let these motherfuckers tell you. Don't let religion tell you. Don't let, government tell you. Like, no, we don't, people talk about belonging to a religion. We don't belong to religions. Religions belong to us. Men have figured that out and have used it against us.
And against women.
Hello.
Men have used that against women.
Yes. Exactly, and so we have a lot of work to do, but we can accomplish a lot within our lifetimes.
Big time.
Yeah.
Saul, great chat. Thank you very much. I got
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
more question, and it's a bit of a Schadenfreude. The German word for laughing at someone else's mistakes at their expense. I wonder if you've got moments in your career, whether it's writing, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's acting, or whether it's kind of before that when you were younger, whether you were like, that was like a really funny work fuck up.
Oh, I have so many fuck ups, bro. I mean, first of all, like on the Treepeople album, like this is not really funny except to anyone but me, but like, like I forgot a poem and I say the wrong word. I even in referencing the Dutch East India Trade Company, for Mannahatta, it was the Dutch West India Trade Company. Right. But I say the Dutch East India Trade Company on the album, and I have to correct it in every interview that I do. But there's always stuff where I'm like, up. And of course, we didn't know we were recording an album the day we were recording that concert.
It's kind of beautiful in a way. I mean, it's a good reminder that you don't have to be fucking.
No, somebody looks it up and goes, well, actually, it was a Dutch West India Trade Company.
Starts a conversation.
Sure. Yes, you are correct. I fucked up.
That's funny, man. Yeah.
But yeah, there's tons. We could be here all day on that one. Yeah.
Good. Sinners, great film.
Thank you.
And I didn't realize how scary it would be, or kind of how mystical it would be.
Yeah.
What was it like shooting that? I mean, just to end this chat with, what are the memories you'll take away from?
Ryan Coogler is an extraordinary individual with a great mind and heart and creative, sensibility. What I can tell you about shooting it that was really like intense was it was my actual first time on a plantation. It was just outside of a few hours outside of New Orleans, and it was a plantation where they had preserved the homes that the enslaved Africans lived in, and which then became sharecroppers' homes and what have you.
Have they been like preserved? Have they kind of kept it kind of more or less like it was?
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. So there's old chains and all this stuff there, and the energy there was really, really, really intense. And so they didn't want to mess up any of those buildings, and so the church that I did majority of my scenes in was built on that property, but between the actual buildings there, so but still with the energy of that property, and that was heavy, bro. Especially seeing those kids and extras come out in the costumes, and being able to kind of feel all of the feet and bodies that had been there and the horrors that had been experienced there. So there's layers of horror, like there's layers of horror in that film that begins there, because we didn't need vampires for chattel slavery, we just needed white supremacy for that.
It's interesting how that energy can come out to what someone like I received, me and my partner, when we watched it.
Yeah,
we get that without knowing even where that comes from.
Yeah,
that energy.
Yeah, no, it's intense.
Thanks, Saul. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Nice one.
All right.
Cheers for watching. This is 101 Part-Time Jobs. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and all podcast apps. We've done interviews with Aurora, Kneecap, Idols, Lauren Maybury of Churches, and loads more. So tap into 101 Part-Time Jobs on Spotify, Apple, and all podcast apps. Welcome along to 101 Part-Time Jobs. Every single one of our episodes is available ad-free at our Patreon, patreon.com/101 Part-Time Jobs. I know that there are all these messages trying to sell you things that you may or may not want. So for £4 a month, that's around $5.50 US. You can get over 450 of our episodes and every single one in the future, featuring all the brilliant guests that we have week in, week out, completely ad-free. You can head to patreon.com/101 Part-Time Jobs, get all your episodes bother free, and you support us directly. Cheers.